Okay, this is a quick review of how to factor a quadratic written as a trinomial. In order to do that, we're going to do a quick review of multiplying binomials. So, if we need to multiply binomials, which we're going to talk a lot about binomials and trinomials and other nomials later after spring break. But first of all, binomials, bi is 2, so it just has 2 terms in it. So when we're multiplying 2 binomials, for example, x and x, those are actually monomials, not binomials. But if we wanted to multiply those, of course we know the answer is x squared, but we could also draw it out. Alright, so we could think of this as a length times a width. The length is x, the width is x. And so we have the area is x squared, because x times x is x squared. That's where we start from, even though that's extremely easy. We can get a tiny bit harder and talk about x times x plus 1. Again, we can think of that as length times width. And again, we could draw it as a rectangle. And we have the length is x, the width is x plus 1, which we could split it up and say this part here is x, and this part here is 1. And so the area of this part right here would be x times x, which is x squared. And the area of this part here would be x times 1, length times width, which would just be x. So the total area is x squared plus x. Okay, so that's pretty easy, and we can keep going and make it a little bit harder, but not much harder. And let's say we have 2 actual binomials. Here's a binomial because it has 2 terms, x and 2. Here's another binomial because it has 2 terms, x and 4. So again, we can think of it as length times width. And again, draw a rectangle. So here we have x plus 4 as the width, x plus 2 as the length. And again, we could say that this part is x and this part is 4. So altogether the length here is x plus 4, and here this part is x, this part is 2, and we can break up our rectangle thusly. So if we had these 4 parts, this part here, the area's length times width is x times x is x squared. And of course, the other part here would be the length is x, the width is 4. X times 4 is 4x. And this part here, the length is 2, the width is x, so that would be 2x. And then the other one, remaining section, would be the length is 2, the width is 4, 2 times 4 equals 8. So the whole area would be just the sum of all the parts, so x squared plus 4x plus 2x plus 8, which is x squared plus 6x plus 8 when we combine those like terms. Okay, so we've done some fairly easy ones. Let's get slightly more difficult here and do 6x plus 4 times 2x plus 1. 6x plus 4 times 2x plus 1. I say it's slightly more difficult because now we have coefficients in front of our x. 6 is the coefficient of the first binomial, the x of the first binomial, and 2 is the coefficient of the x in the second binomial, but we can still think of it as length times width. So if the length is 6x plus 4, the width is 2x plus 1. Again, we can break it up into the parts. Now I'm going to just write the math inside here. I think you got it. So 6x times 2x would be 12x squared. 6x times 1 is 6x. 4 times 2x is 8x, and 4 times 1 is 4. So the total area here, 12x squared plus 8x plus 6x plus 4, which if you combine like terms, 12x squared plus 14x plus 4. And that's it for multiplying binomials. Of course, we can use negatives as well, and let's use that to kind of try to notice a pattern here. So if we do one more, and I said it was it for multiplying binomials, but I want to do one with negatives and notice a pattern. So negative 2x plus 1 times negative 3x plus 4, and let's draw a rectangle that has the length negative 2x plus 1 and a width negative 3x plus 4. We can break it up. And this would be negative 3 times negative 2 is positive 6, so 6x squared, negative 8x, negative 3x, and positive 4. And we could quickly add this up and find that the area is 6x squared minus 11x plus 4. That's easy, but that's not what I wanted you to notice. What I want you to notice is if we look at these two things right here, what happens when we look at the product of that and compare it to the product of that? So we have here 6x squared times 4. Well, that's just 24x squared. What about the blue one, or green one, whatever color that is? Negative 8x times negative 3x. Again, it's 24x squared. And of course, you may be wondering, does that always happen? And the answer is yes, or else I probably wouldn't be showing it to you. Look up here. 12 times 4 is 48, so that's 48x squared. And 8 times 6 is 48, so that's 48x squared as well. And we can use that when we start to learn how to factor. So let's do that now. So let's say we are trying to factor the following trinomial, right? Tri because we have 3 terms. So if we wanted to factor this trinomial here, 4x squared minus 2x minus 6. Well, let's get our rectangle going. And this time, we don't know what the length and width are, because we don't have, that's what we're looking for. Factor means to find the two binomials. So, but we do know that in general, we've been sectioning off our rectangles into 4 parts. They are not equal, even though I drew them as being close to equal. We know that the negative 6 goes here. We know that 4x squared goes here. What else do we know? We know that these here are going to, the product of those two terms are going to be the same as the product of these two terms. So we're looking for two numbers whose product is negative 24, because x times x is going to get x squared, same thing as we have over here. So we're looking for two numbers whose product is negative 24. But what else do we know about these two numbers? Well, we know that these are our x's. So our total number of x's here is right here, our negative 2x. So we need to also know that the two numbers sum to negative 2. So we're looking for two numbers whose product is negative 24 and sum, I should write, is negative 2. Well, maybe you remember the diamond problems from 9th grade, maybe not. So there's negative 24, there's negative 2. So this times this has to equal negative 24, this plus this has to equal negative 2. Once again, how did I get that? The product of the diagonals here have to be the same. So this is negative 24, so this has to be negative 24. And these are our x's, and we have negative 2 x's. So this plus this has to equal negative 2 because they are negative 2 x's. So we can list out our factors of negative 24. So we have negative 24 and 1. I know my bigger number is going to be negative because the sum is negative. That doesn't add up to negative 2 though. I have negative 12 and 2. Again, that does not add to negative 2. I have, let's see, negative 8 and 3. No, that doesn't work either. Those do not add up to negative 2. Negative 6 and 4. They do add up to negative 2. Negative 6 plus 4 does equal negative 2. So the two missing numbers were negative 6 and 4. So I can go ahead and write those in and see what happens. So which one should I put where? Doesn't matter. So I'm going to put negative 6 here, and I'm going to put 4 here. So I have negative 6 and positive 4. That's the inside. I still have to find the outside. So I look for the greatest common factor between 4x squared and negative 6x. Well, the greatest common factor between 4 and negative 6 is positive 2. And x squared and x is x. So I have 2x here. Well, if this is 2x, what does this have to be to multiply to 4x squared? It also has to equal 2x. And if that's 2x, then what does this have to be? 2x times what number gets me 4x? It has to be positive 2. And if this is 2x, what does this have to be? Well, 2x times this has to equal negative 6x, so this has to be negative 3. So my factors are 2x plus 2 times 2x plus negative 3. And there you have it. You have factored those two, that one trinomial into the product of two binomials. So, if you wanted to do one more, we could. Alright, so the next problem we could do is if we wanted to factor 8x squared plus 14x minus 4. And we can make our rectangle. We have 8x squared here. We have negative 4 here. So once again, we check to see what the product needs to be. 8 times negative 4 is negative 32. So we're looking for two numbers that multiply to negative 32. And what do they need to add to? Well, these are x's. We have 14. So we're looking for two numbers that multiply to negative 32 and add to positive 14. So let's start writing our factors of negative 32. This time, I know the larger factor is going to be positive because they have to add to a positive number. So 32 and negative 1, that does not add to 14. 16 and negative 2, that does. 16 plus negative 2 is positive 14. So 16, negative 2. Again, doesn't matter where they go. Greatest common factor here, 8x squared and 16x is 8x. 8x times x gets me 8x squared. 8x times 2 gets me 16x. X times negative 2 gets me negative 2x. And let's check. 2 times negative 2 is negative 4. Excellent. So 8x plus negative 2 times x plus 2. I have now factored that trinomial. That is your review. If you need more practice, please come and get some more practice problems for that. You're ready to move on to finding wholes and asymptotes in rational functions. Goodbye.